Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. How do we create pathways to decarbonize the transport sector? I have someone here who's going to give us a little lens into that process with me. Emily Phillips, founder of E.Mission Advisory, is with us. Emily, welcome to the Hot Seat.
Hi, Spencer. Thank you for having me.
All right, before we heat things up, Emily, why don't we just take 20 seconds to just tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing over there at your firm?
Absolutely. So E.Mission Advisory is an advisory firm dedicated to helping transport sector and supply chain companies work toward decarbonization. And historically, the transport sector is a very difficult sector to abate and decarbonize. And so the work ahead of us is going to take some time. We're early stages or in the beginning of what's going to be a couple of decades long journey. And I just want to be here and advise and help that process in any way I can.
All right, so we'll jump right in here. So before, just for a little context here, now you and I have crossed paths many times in the final mile arena, but your journey and your experience in the transportation space goes back a little bit deeper and broader than that. So our audience can appreciate kind of the angle that you're coming from. Just give us a little background on that.
Sure. So I come from the supply chain and transport sector itself. I've been an operator, a solutions advisor, both on the retail side and as a carrier for the last 25 years. The last 15 years, I was with XPO Logistics in their final mile heavy bulky and providing solutions and implementation for all new business there. Before that, I was in supply chain at the Home Depot and working on heavy, bulky consumer delivery of appliances and building materials. So I come from a viewpoint of understanding how the sector operates and the real world problems that arise from some of the things that we're facing today. Over the last 3 years of my tenure at XPO, I really got more focused and interested in the sustainability aspect because customers were coming to us asking us to help them with their sustainability goals. And so we all had to become experts really quickly on new technology and trying to figure out, what's available now, what can we do, and how do we create a strategy to partner with, the retail sector and our retail clients to help put something in place where everyone can achieve their decarbonization goals.
So we hear the words decarbonization, sustainability. In your own words, why should we care?
I mean, it's a personal passion of mine. I think, I see more and more just the reality of what we're facing with increased number of fires and drought and storms and things that are happening to the planet. So it's, from a personal perspective, this really is kind of a mission of mine that is really important to me. But from a business standpoint, we need to also answer that question. Why should we care? The transport sector is an enormous part of greenhouse gas emissions. It's nearly a third of emissions in the United States. It's the highest sector category. And it's one that, is there's a huge focus to try and figure out the best way or multiple best ways to decarbonize. Within transportation itself, the carriers are starting to care because, again, as I mentioned, they're being asked to do something about it, whether that's provide actual solutions through zero emission equipment or report on their greenhouse gas emissions or provide a strategy. And so it's something that is popping up on a more frequent basis from a business standpoint for those carriers. And it's something that many of them are just now trying to figure out how to address and may not have the skills or the tool set or the understanding of how to best go about doing that.
Yeah, it seems from my vantage point, there's a lot of things at play here, and it's kind of confusing for a lot of folks. How would you describe what's happening? Right? Like you mentioned, it's a process, like getting on a path to decarbonize the transport sector. Where are we right now in that process?
I'm going to quote NACFE, and it's the North American Council for Freight Efficiency. They have a fantastic graphic. It's free advertising for them, called the messy middle. And I use this in every discussion right now for talking about where we are as a sector. We're at the very beginning of trying to figure out what the end game will look like for transportation. There are a lot of pilots happening. There's a lot of new technology. I mean, you can read the news every day, and there's something new, some new technology with hydrogen fuel, or some new battery cell technology that looks promising. So there are a lot of new and emerging technologies that are being invented as we are sitting here. What's going to happen is that we're going to be vetting through those over the next several years. And the ones with the most promise are going to be the ones that start to take off. So you're already sort of seeing that with battery electric in the passenger vehicle sector. Seems to be one of the best options for passenger. Will battery electric be the best option for heavy duty, tractor trailers? Likely not. So we're going to have to figure out what is going to be the best solution, best technology, best equipment, depending on the use case that's out there. And so, long answer to your short question, we're at the early stages of trying to figure it all out. And that's actually what I find most exciting about it, is that it's very collaborative, in that we're all trying to figure this out together. There's not a team of experts that already knows what to do. It's going to be a process of trying to figure out, the best path forward.
Well, Emily, I've been telling everyone you're the team of experts that they should be talking to. So did I misspeak there, or?
No, absolutely. I'm one of them. It's a community of a lot of very passionate people. And, I'm one person. I know a lot of things, but the things that I don't know, I can reach out to that community and find people that do.
So let's try to kind of, put this into a real life situation. You mentioned challenges. So tell us about a challenge of an operator trying, maybe that shares your vision and that has your same passion. What are some of the challenges that they are experiencing to move towards this path, or to decarbonize their own companies?
Sure. I think one challenge right now in the time that we're in today, in 2023, is that, especially if you're looking for battery electric conversion and equipment, we're still kind of at the early stages of infrastructure and equipment availability. So the challenge right now is that there are limited models available for, if we're talking heavy bulky goods, which is the sector I come from, limited box truck type equipment, Class 6 vehicles available today, and fairly limited charging infrastructure. Is that going to last forever? No. There are a lot of new models coming off of the production line with the OEMs as early as later this year and into 2024, 25. And there's quite a bit of investment being poured into the infrastructure federally and on the state level. So again, it's kind of that early challenge of, the demand may be there. Yes, we want to try and pilot some things, but we might be limited in the geography or how many trucks we can deploy right now until more equipment and more infrastructure becomes available.
Interesting. What about for the person that doesn't have the passion and maybe doesn't see the science around those things? What is, what's the business case for adopting these, getting on a path to decarbonization? What is the business case for doing things that are good for the environment?
I do think that specifically within this sector, sorry, I'm probably going to have to re-record that. I'm trying to think of the word.
Well, I can record.
Okay.
I would have preferred to record it on here. I'll do it again because I can do it better myself. Uh, so for the skeptic that maybe not have a passion for the environment, what would you say is the business case for that person to get on a path to decarbonize their transport business?
Sure. I will offer two business cases. The first being from a business perspective is that the pressures may come externally from either federal regulatory, state regulatory, or your client base who may be requiring some of these things. And then you're in a situation where you need to respond in order to retain that client or grow your business. So from a business standpoint, those pressures are going to continue, and we're seeing that in the environment that we're in today. The second business case that I will offer is that your employees may be looking to you to do something or have a strategy around decarbonizing. So the younger generation this is really important to them in order to be able to attract talent to your organization. This might be something that they're looking for in order for them to say yes to your offer. So you want to be able to grow your business with the best talent that's out there. It's something that's, if it's something that's really important to your employee base, then it's something that should be considered in your overall business strategy.
So let's dive in there just a little bit. What are the realities? I mean, from even in things that you and I have talked about at conferences in terms of the pressure that they're getting from large retailers or customers, whoever it is, to demonstrate that they are a good corporate citizen. So what kind of pressure? What like maybe can you give us some tangible results of like what that looks like when that pressure is coming?
Sure.
And
so I'll give two examples. One from your customer base. What we're seeing most frequently now, you do have your early adopters out there. You've got Ikea, who's a global retailer, and they have a global zero emission delivery strategy that they're rolling out over multiple years, and that's funded from the top down. So they're kind of the early adopters. Just one example. There are many others, but there's a small group of early adopters that are really pushing, corporate boards, CEO down, to adopt strategies to decarbonize. What you will find in the wave behind that in your client base is tell me your plan. So what we're seeing most frequently is questions in an RFP, multiple questions in an RFP that you might not have seen before, requirements to participate in ESG framework assessments that you might not have seen before. And some of those are very involved and can take many, many hours to respond to. You have to provide backup documentation, that kind of thing. The other thing is, if your clients are taking this one step further, you might need to have a minimum score on some of those assessments in order to receive future RFPs. So that, from a business standpoint, is why, it's one reason to make sure that you have a strategy in place so that you can respond that way. Another real life example of where some of the pressures are potentially coming or are already coming, especially within California. So you've got CARB, the California Air Resources Board, who already has some regulations in place that require reporting to the state. We also have potential SEC disclosure of greenhouse gas emissions that would be filed all along with your financial reporting on a quarterly or annual basis. That's expected to be finalized this fall. So for public companies, that is another layer of compliance and reporting that is kind of looming out there in the future.
Yeah, I think that we can probably agree. The business owners that we serve in this space, they're some of the most others-centered people you're going to meet on Earth, and I think that they're, to the degree that they want to be good corporate citizens. So where do you think, like, and then we have the, and I think where I see some tension is this, there's a disconnect between, what is being mandated versus what the folks that are actually required to do the work can actually do in a
Hmm.
certain amount of time. So why the disconnect? I mean, why is, it seems like this could, if everybody wants the same thing, why isn't this being rolled out and adopted in a more harmonious type fashion?
Sure. I mean, you're absolutely right. It is probably one of the biggest, it's going to be a huge disruptor for the next several years. This, along with AI, along with autonomous, I mean, there's a lot of activity and disruption going on in the transportation space right now. The friction, and I think you nailed it, is yes, I want to do this, but how do I do it and how do I pay for it?
Right.
Because it's not it, the technology is in many cases 3 times the cost of buying an internal combustion piece of equipment. So we have to figure out, and that's some of the things that we have to try and find a pathway for is there federal grant assistance is or state assistance? How are we going to bridge that gap of cost? Because that I mean that real talk, that is a
Yeah.
huge hurdle. I think you're absolutely right. Everyone in this business wants to do the right thing and wants to be a good corporate citizen, but they're also business owners and they do have to profit in order to be successful. So we have to figure out the best pathway to do that. Whether the adoption of the equipment is going to make the costs come down in the long term, but what do we do in the meantime? How do we kind of bridge that gap?
So another common characteristic within the transport space is a dedication to safety. And
Hmm.
so I think I saw this in an article, and I kind of want to play devil's advocate with you for funsies. So, but basically, the article stated like, hey, for the person that, right or wrong, does not have a passion, does not see the science around the effects of climate change or related issues, but they know for certain if you increase the weight of a truck by 30%, it makes it much more dangerous for everybody on the road. And so, well, how do you respond to that? Because like there's differing views on the level of evidence in terms of climate change, but that's pretty definitive in terms of what, if you increase the weight, what that can do in terms of the threat on the road.
Sure.
Like how do you respond to that business owner who makes that case?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the weight is certainly an issue if you're speaking strictly about battery.
Mhm.
The weight is an issue not only for safety and stopping time, but for um, class of vehicle and licenses required if you hit
Mhm.
certain thresholds of weight. So, um, I would say that technology keeps getting better and better as far as assisted driving and warning around distance between
Mhm.
vehicle and the vehicle in front of you, automatic braking, and we're even getting into autonomous technology, where the truck might end up driving itself on the interstate at some point, and that's already happening today, with pretty interesting safety statistics in a good way. So I think with anything, there's going to be the ups and downs and the pros and cons. There's some potential, when you talk about solid state batteries that could be lighter than what we're seeing today, evolving to make the total weight of the vehicle lower, which would be ideal. So I think there are many, many, many moving parts to this whole equation. And, in my mind, the good outweighs the bad, but there's always going to be things that you need to take into account from a risk perspective.
Yeah, and I think that there's I think what's exciting is that our country has always risen to the challenge when there's been a hard thing in front of us, and
Right.
so I'm optimistic that there'll be all kinds of new technologies emerging as a response to this challenge. So I'm very optimistic about what is ahead. But I want to hear what you think, Emily. Like looking out, 3 5 years, like what do you think is going to happen here? I mean, what is the transport space going to look like when we start seeing meaningful reductions in carbon footprint? What do you expect?
Yeah, I'm excited too. I think there's a lot to do, and right now, I think folks are attacking the space where the technology is available and where the mode fits the technology. So there's quite a bit of adoption already happening in the passenger vehicle space. I think we're over 5, maybe 6% of sales are EVs these days, and climbing a bit faster than was originally expected. You've got the mobility space. So you're talking passenger bus, school bus type of applications that are seeing a lot of great adoption with battery electric. And then we'll continue to adopt as the mode makes sense. So you've got Walmart and Amazon that are deploying thousands and thousands of Sprinter van type of electric vehicles. And then we'll start to attack the larger class of truck. So we'll get into medium duty. We'll get into utility, like, garbage truck type of applications. I do think that it's going to be challenging trying to, the final adopter will be heavy duty over the road. There's a lot of promise with hydrogen, but there's a lot to do. There's a long way to go to get infrastructure and that equipment ready to deploy at large scale. So I think that'll probably be last. But what we'll start to see is more and more awareness over the next few years, more and more piloting and adoption of those modes that make sense. There's a lot of adoption already in drayage applications, specifically in California, but other states that are adopting California's, clean fleet and clean truck kind of legislation. There's 17 other states that are looking at that. So I think we will start to see a lot more movement, a lot more awareness, and then at some point that becomes a tipping point where it just becomes something that everyone has a plan for.
So let me just kind of hang out there for a second, because obviously a big part of your passion, a big part of your value proposition is about helping these folks develop a strategy so that there is,
Right.
an answer to that customer that expects a plan of some in place. So what are some of the building blocks for people that don't have a strategy, that don't have a plan to begin decarbonizing their transport businesses? Like, walk us through the first steps from
Sure.
developing a strategy.
I think there's two. It kind of takes two paths. The first, in my mind, is really around data and measurement. So you can't improve what you can't measure. So for those companies that are not currently measuring their emissions footprint, putting a plan in place to make sure that you can capture that data and replicate the capture of that data easily on a year-by-year basis. And then you can start to kind of measure, where do you think you can chip away at that? Where are some of the applications in your operations where you feel like the technology is available, the use case fits, the price is right? Where can you start to make a strategy? So once you start measuring, then you can start to put your operational equipment strategy in place. The pressure may be coming, like we talked about earlier, from a regulatory standpoint, from a customer standpoint, and you can start to put a strategy together, near term, medium, and long term, around where the greatest pressures are, and try and slot your projects in where it makes sense financially, where it makes sense from a return on your investment standpoint, and then just start working the plan. So I come from a engineering and a project background, so that's just my natural inclination, is just measure, put the plan in place, and just start working the plan, because the plan will continually change. It's going to evolve over the next 15 years, and so starting with measurement is a good place to start.
So I'm curious, with the folks and the businesses that you have worked with, once they start measuring the data, what are they most surprised about? What do they discover that they're most surprised about with their own businesses, with that data being a new focus?
I mean, it varies. I think a lot of it is the understanding of where your footprint lies. So it might be surprising to see a lot of it is maybe tied to your real estate footprint or your energy consumption.
Mm-hmm.
There are some other things that you can do as a business that aren't really related to your transportation spend, but maybe your energy spend.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are peripheral things that you can do from an ESG standpoint around, recycling and things that aren't related to emissions, that people may be surprised to see some of the numbers, maybe are as high as they are. And it just, especially if you start measuring year over year, then you can start to tout your wins. So you can really use that from a PR standpoint to say, look what we've done. Like we are really putting emphasis on this. We have these 4 projects for this year. We've made progress on it. And you can tout that as wins on your website.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned Ikea earlier, and I have heard, maybe it was from you directly. It probably was. It probably was, but Ikea was doing something to reimburse their transport providers if they did. I think if they were running electrical vehicles, or like they were
subsidy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was some level of subsidies taking place. And I guess that's my question. Like, to what degree are the customers sharing in the decarbonization of the transport sector? Because
mm-hmm.
To me, that's kind of in bad faith. It's like, we want you to carry it all, and otherwise we're not going to do business with you. And so, like, I'm just curious, like, what does that landscape look like, and what are you experiencing?
I mean, I think it varies as uniquely as every customer relationship. Mm-hmm. So it's going to depend on, if that's the only customer that's taking advantage of that equipment, it might be a different negotiation than if it's going to be shared across multiple customers. There might be kind of some shared cost in there. There might be third parties with, grant money trying to be used to help subsidize that additional cost. So I think it's any and all combinations right now. And people are getting pretty creative.
All right. One last question for you, Emily, a little bit of a wild card. I've observed you in a variety of leadership roles in this industry at the association level and several others. I'm curious, what leaders do you have your eye on right now? It doesn't have to be sustainability or ESG related, but I'm just curious. Who do you think is leading and inspiring well? And what can you share with us? What can you share with us about that?
Sure. Well, I'll just tell you who is always popping up in my LinkedIn feed. I follow a lot of people in this space, specifically within sustainability. I follow Tyler Cole from FreightWaves. He has a lot of great insight and posts and his own podcast. I follow Craig Harper from JB Hunt, who also has, comes at sustainability from an operator's background. He's been in the business for a very long time and has a lot of wisdom about this. Matt McClellan from Covenant Transport also has a lot of great insight. And I just follow various other folks within this space. I mean, it's a really interesting community of a lot of passionate people who are not, working as competitors. They're all just really trying to share information and work together to try and figure out solutions here.
Well, we'll have to tag those folks when we post this event. Listen, Emily, I really appreciate you just sharing and educating our audience just about, something that is becoming more and more a part of our world and what's to come. So thank you for being in the hot seat. That's going to do it for us here. We will see you next time.